The keynote address for today is delivered by Dr. Kapil Kapoor. Dr. Kapil Kapoor is a former professor of English at the Center for Linguistics and English at Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, and concurrent professor at the Center for Sanskrit Studies, JNU as well. His teaching and research interests include Indian and Western literary and linguistic theories, philosophy of language, 19th century British life, literature and thought, and Indian intellectual traditions. He has authored several books, most prominent amongst them being Semantic Structure and the Verb, a Propositional Analysis, Canonical Texts of Literary Criticism, Language, Linguistics and Literature, the Indian Perspective, and most recently, Dimensions of Panini Grammar, Indian Grammatical System. I invite Dr. Kapil Kapoor on the dais. Thank you.
Namaskar. You just heard a very brief obituary. He was this, he was this, he was this. Since most of at my age, everything about me is past tense. I have my natural diffidence in addressing such an august, learned audience, and also because I'm not really in my own swimming pool. I'm very grateful to Krishna Shastri ji, Snehal ji and Anand ji, who successfully resisted my reluctance, and I'm happy to be here thinking about something with which I have not been very consistently or continuously engaged. Because the two things were there. It's a Department of Interior Design, it's an Institute of Architecture, and they are wanting to talk about dialogue. My respected friend Doshi ji has in fact given a very beautiful preface to the range of issues involved, from mere mechanical designing to conceptualizing the sacred. Within that there is a whole space. I like to ramble and share with you some of my thoughts. The whole question of dialogue, you see, we know that suddenly, thanks to the relatively recent multiculturalism of the West, of UK and Europe, I say relatively recent. You see, it's post-World War II, that with the large-scale migration, immigration, invited and not non-invited, that suddenly the nation states are facing complex social, political and cultural issues. For the first time they are handling a lot of people who don't share the same religion, who don't share the same ethnicity, and very often they don't even share the language. So multiculturalism has became very important. And this sudden revival of Bakhtin, Mikhail Bakhtin, who explicitly, in the context of his own experience of the Russian Empire, I'm saying not Russia but Russian Empire, multicultural, vast and all that, talked about the dialogic imagination, the need to talk to the other, the need to understand the other. So this is a recent phenomenon. So dialogue has become an issue, an important subject in the Western academy. And since we generally take up the same issues that the Western Academy does, in India also now we have been talking a good deal about dialogue. Our roaming intellectual, Amartya Sen, and he has been quoted in your book, has talked about the need for a dialogue. The basic issue in this is the question of knowledge. You may, although that's a problem word, you may call it the question of truth, and also the question of certainty. How certainly and with what certainty one can constitute cognitions, constitute knowledge, and how does one evaluate the validity of that knowledge. That's the basic question. When we talk of dialogue, multilogue, monologue, the question is, are we what we are talking about? Because every sentence, every declarative sentence is a claim of truth. It's a claim of knowledge. Even when I say, I eat something and say, this is very tasty. Apparently, on the surface, it's a claim of truth. Except that, I forget and I'm not required in the social communication to say, inverted commas, that I am saying it. So, my friend sitting next will say, oh, no, sorry. You find it tasty, it's not tasty. Even from such an ordinary thing as this is tasty to a statement like God exists, there is infinite variety of difference and agreement. So the basic question is the status of knowledge. In our tradition, at one stage or in one school of philosophy, Vedanta, Advaita, declarative sentences are accepted as statements of truth. Tat tvam asi, aham brahmasmi. And they are not to be read as metaphors. They are to be understood literally. If you read the metaphors, then they are not statements of truth. But fortunately for us Indians, we have not been monologic. Never. So we have, for example, 3 collaborative traditions, almost 2,000 years of attested debate between the 3 sampradaya schools. What is very mistakenly referred to as Brahman Sampradaya, and then you have whole lot of people talking of Brahmanical traditions without understanding that the Vedanta school, which they call Brahmanical, is not Brahmanical, it is Brahmanical. That is a school of thought which operates with the category of Brahma, Brahman. Not many of my students and my colleagues, I found, were able to distinguish, thanks to our education, between Brahma, Brahman, Brahmanas, and Brahmin. These are 5 different things. So confusing Brahman with Brahmin, Brahmanical, that is something to do with Brahmins. Totally wrong. Anyways, this is not the place to talk about that. So collaborative, I call it confrontational collaborative intellectual traditions, 2,000 years of debate between the Brahman Sampradaya, that is, they are also called grammarians by the others, the Buddhists and the Jainas. So we are not a monologic people. We are not a monologic people. We are a we have debated about issues and things from the beginning. So when Adi Shankara said that my statements, declarative statements, he never said that. He was too modest, too wise a person to say. But his followers have said that these declarative sentences are statements of truth. There were the Mimamsakas within the same tradition who said no, Vidhi Vakyas are not statements of truth. If at all, verifiable truth is expressed by performative sentences. You are given an injunction to perform. If it can be done, then it's verifiable truth. So, in our rich intellectual traditions, there has been, I just want to say that I don't think Indian mind ever claimed certainty. I don't think Indian mind ever claimed the truth. There is no one truth. And therefore, but that doesn't mean that the Indian mind worried about a solipsistic fear of unknowability. No. There is no certainty, but there is no fear, no anxiety about unknowability, because there is a grand understanding that there is a truth out there. After all, the whole universe hangs together in a balance. The only problem is when we predicate about it, when we talk about it, that's where the problem begins. So contrary to the popular misconception that Indians don't believe in reality, Indians in fact believe that there is something real. But they say it's not easy, it's not possible to make one statement of that real. Ekam satya vipra bahudha vadanti. There is a truth out there. But the wise men predicate about it in 100 ways. And my friend Bhartrihari, 5th century AD, he says, Swavikalpaja vada bahudha mata. Every thinker with his own construction, the word vikalpa literally means construct. Every thinker with his own predilection, with his own mental construction, comes up with a vada, a point of view, a school, and all are valid. All are valid. So, while this concern with the dialogue, the recent sudden importance of this issue, because of relatively recent multiculturalism, and thanks to Michael Bakhtin, who was, by the way, also a Sanskrit scholar. Not many people are aware that the notion of several points of view, several paths, he has no point that one is devaluing Bakhtin. Hundreds and thousands of Indians have read Indian thought. None came up with a concept like dialogic imagination. So no point in devaluing him. We also have always been multicultural. You see, so the point is that this question of dialogue is nothing new for us. Nothing new for us. Remember, you see, Plato talking in his dialogue Cratylus, he refers to Heraclitus, the first attested Greek thinker who said that there is nothing to know, there is no knower, and there is no knowledge. Doesn't it remind us of what our Buddhist thinkers, so I don't know which way the winds were blowing, but I think they were blowing from all directions, because Heraclitus is around the time that the Buddhist thought was also very strong in India. Remember the Buddhist saying that the moment you name something, look at that wave in water. Look at that wave. The moment you say wave, by the time you say it, it's gone. It's changed. It's gone. So, since the reality is momentary and in constant flux, you cannot catch it. Since you cannot catch it, so your words are names only for your mental images of an ever-changing reality. Therefore, you cannot understand reality. So the suggestion of difficulty in knowability is there, and is fairly close to Heraclitus. 1,000 years later, 800 years later, Bhartrihari says, a wise man should always reflect on his cognitions, because the same man looking at the same object in the morning and in the evening will have a different cognition. So, while the objects according to Buddhists are in flux, the receptor's mind, your perceiving instruments, your conceptualizing mind is also not a very stable object. Therefore, the question of certainty, the question of truth is not there at all. So how to gain valid knowledge? How to gain valid knowledge if this is so? The individual consciousness not being reliable, because the same man having different reflexes to the same object and no two persons sharing the same reflex about the same object, then how to gain knowledge? ज्ञान कैसे होगा? कैसे मिलेगा ज्ञान? It's a question then of epistemology. The limits of senses and the limits of the human mind. Those of us who have had occasion to read Adi Shankara, particularly his remarkably brilliant small book, Vivek Chudamani, he dwells never at length, because Indians never dwell at length, Indian thinkers. They are aphoristic, and you are supposed to work out the methodologies and the background and everything that has gone in. He explains why the senses are. So does Bhartrihari. He says, we talk of a glowworm, but we talk of a firefly, but there is no fire in the fly. We talk of a sky, but there is no sky. You try reaching it, there is no sky. Therefore, there is a chasm. There is a chasm between predication and what is. So this says that the senses, what the eye sees, our human senses are very, very poor. I don't know why we don't have, the Hindus are the last pagans left, so we don't have God with a capital G. So we can't really blame anyone. So we may say gods. I don't know why gods did not give us an eyesight as good as that of an eagle, or sense of smell as good as that of a dog. You see, our senses are very weak. And they also mislead you, because you see what is not there. You see what's not there. So you go into all those mirages and so on and so on. So senses are limited. First of all, they are inadequate, they are poor, and then they are malfunctioning often. So empiricist epistemology, sensory instruments of knowledge, cannot give you knowledge. We have invented beautiful machines, huge machines, to increase the power of our senses. So a telescope to increase our eyesight, hearing aids to hear more. But then ultimately, since the judgment rests with the human senses, and the human senses are presided over by the mind, so whatever the input, you may go wrong. That's why doctors, after seeing those beautiful pictures of your inside, they differ. They say this shadow, it is this. The other doctor says it is not this. Because the photograph is there, but the mind and the senses are yours. So the judgmental value remains. In the same way, the post-Renaissance, tremendous respect attached to reason in the Western history of ideas, which is the